In the 1960s, London was the center of the world. An explosion of music, fashion, and freedom. It was the city of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, of Carnaby Street and miniskirts. But beneath the neon lights and glamour, another heart was beating. A dark, violent heart ruled by two men, two brothers. Identical twins, Ronnie and Reggie Kray. They were celebrities. Owners of the most exclusive clubs, photographed by David Bailey, rubbing shoulders with stars like Frank Sinatra and Judy Garland. They were the kings of London's nightlife, but they were also monsters. Their empire wasn't built on charm, but on fear, on extortion, armed robbery, and cold-blooded murder. To understand the Krays, you have to understand the post-war East End of London. A labyrinth of grey streets, poverty, and bomb-scarred buildings. Here, in 1933, Ronnie and Reggie Kray were born. Identical in appearance, but with a different darkness inside each of them. Their father was a shadow, an absent con man on the run from the army. Their world was their mother, Violet. She adored them. She saw them as her princes, special and destined for greatness. In a neighborhood where infant death was common, the fact that both survived made her a local celebrity. She taught them they only had each other and her. They didn't need anyone else. This devotion sowed the seeds of a dangerous narcissism in them. They believed they were extraordinary, that the rules didn't apply to them. Their grandfather, a boxer, saw their innate aggression and pushed them into the ring. Boxing became their first language. They learned to channel their fury into precise, brutal punches. Reggie was the technician, the boxer with championship potential. Ronnie was the brute force, less controlled, wilder. But the ring was never enough. The violence of the street was calling them. The point of no return came in 1952. Called up for a national service, they reported to the Tower of London only to try and desert minutes later. When a corporal tried to stop them, Ronnie broke his jaw with a single punch. Their military career was a chaos of insubordination, escapes, and assaults on guards. It ended with a dishonorable discharge and the certainty the Kray twins would never submit to any authority. They had declared war on society, and now they were ready to conquer it, free from military discipline, and with their boxing careers ruined by their records. The Krays turned to full-time crime. Their first move was to buy an old billiard hall in Mile End. From that humble base, they began to build their empire. Their method was simple and effective: extortion. They offered protection to business owners. If they refused, their premises would burn, or their bones would be broken. Soon, their gang, known as the Firm, became the dominant force in the East End. But the twins had ambitions that went beyond their neighborhood. They wanted the West End, the glittering heart of London. In 1960, while Ronnie was serving a short sentence, Reggie made the masterstroke. He acquired Esmeralda's Barn, a club in luxurious Knightsbridge. This club changed everything. Suddenly, the Krays weren't just East End thugs. They were entrepreneurs, hosts to the elite. In their clubs, the criminal underworld mingled with high society. Actors, politicians, and international stars drank champagne under the same roof as the city's most feared murderers and extortionists. Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, Diana Dors. They all passed through their doors. They became a new kind of celebrity. They wore impeccable suits, drove luxury cars, and posed for fashion photographer David Bailey. Their image, to identical faces, hard and elegant, became an icon of swinging London, as Ronnie later said. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones ruled the music. And my brother and I ruled London. We were fucking untouchable, but it was a facade. A mask of glamour hiding a reality of ruthless violence. A mask that was about to slip. The Krays' empire rested on a delicate balance: public charm and private terror. But the violence that had brought them to the top was an uncontrollable beast. especially in Ronnie. Diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, his temper became increasingly volatile, his delusions more dangerous. On March 9, 1966, that balance was shattered. George Cornell, a member of the rival Richardson gang, was having a drink at the Blind Beggar pub, deep in Kray territory. Months earlier, Cornell had called Ronnie a fat poof. For Ronnie, it was a death sentence. That night, he walked into the pub, strode directly to Cornell, pulled out a pistol, and shot him in the head at point-blank range, in front of a dozen witnesses. When the police arrived, no one had seen a thing. Fear was stronger than justice. The murder was a demonstration of power, but also a fatal mistake. It was too public, too brazen. The police now had a reason to never take their eyes off them. While Ronnie sank into his madness, Reggie faced his own crisis. He had married Frances Shee, a local girl. For Reggie, she was his anchor, his only chance at a normal life. But Frances was terrified of the world she had entered, the violence, the constant fear, the shadow of Ronnie. It was a gilded cage. In 1967, at just 23 years old, Frances took her own life. Frances's death shattered Reggie. His last connection to normality was severed. He plunged into alcohol and rage, and that rage needed a victim. Jack the Hat McVitie, a minor member of the firm, had failed an assignment and, worse, had threatened the twins' dot at a party in a basement in Stoke Newington. Reggie, egged on by Ronnie, decided McVitie had to die. He tried to shoot him, but the gun jammed. What followed was not a clean execution, but a butchering. Reggie lunged at McVitie with a carving knife, stabbing him again and again in the face, chest, and stomach. This murder was different. McVitie was one of their own. The brutality of the attack, the madness in Reggie's eyes, terrified even their most loyal men. The underworld code had been broken, and the wall of silence that had protected the Krays for years finally began to crumble. The man who would bring down the Krays was not a rival gangster, but a Scotland Yard detective, a short, meticulous, and incorruptible man, Leonard Nipper Reid. Reid had tried to catch the twins years before, but had run into the famous wall of silence of the East End. No one would talk. The fear of reprisal was absolute. But the murder of Jack McVitie changed everything. The twins' violence had become too erratic, too personal. Members of the firm began to fear that any one of them could be next. For the first time, some were willing to talk. Nipper Reid knew it. He assembled his team and began to build his case, piece by piece. He secretly interviewed gang members, offering them protection in exchange for their testimony. The turning point came when the Krays' own cousin, Ronnie Hart, decided to cooperate. Horrified by what he had witnessed at McVitie's murder, with the testimonies secured, Reid had what he needed. On May 8, 1968, Scotland Yard launched a massive operation. Ronnie, Reggie, and 15 other members of the firm were arrested. The trial, in 1969, was the longest and most sensational in British legal history. The Krays, sitting in the dock, still acted like celebrities, but their power had vanished. The testimonies of their former associates painted a terrifying picture of their reign of terror. The jury found them guilty of murder. In his sentencing, Judge Melford Stevenson uttered the words that would mark the end of an era. In my opinion, society has earned a rest from your activities. They were sentenced to life imprisonment, with a recommendation of no release for 30 years. The Kray empire had fallen. Ronnie and Reggie Kray spent the rest of their lives behind bars. Ronnie was declared criminally insane and moved to the high-security Broadmoor Hospital, where he died of a heart attack in 1995. Reggie served over 30 years in some of Britain's toughest prisons. He was released on compassionate grounds in 2000, ill with cancer, and died 8 weeks later. Their funerals were massive events. Thousands of people lined the streets of the East End to say goodbye to the men who had once terrorized them. The violence, the murders, the fear... It all seemed forgotten, replaced by a strange nostalgia. And therein lies the final enigma of the craze. Why does their legend endure? Why are these ruthless thugs remembered by some as folk heroes, as the last rebels of a bygone era? Perhaps the answer lies in the image they so carefully crafted themselves. The image of expensive suits, glamorous clubs, and famous friends. An image so powerful that, for many, it has managed to eclipse the blood and suffering on which it was built. The legend of the craze is not just a crime story. It's a story about the power of image and our dangerous fascination with monsters who dress like kings. Thank you for staying until the end. Behind every video are hours of research to bring you the complete story. If you value that effort, the best way to support us is by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. See you in the next investigation.